Thank you, member. I now recognize the member for Burnaby North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to speak in favour of the motion, be it resolved that this House agree that governments should work to build an equitable economy for all, not just the wealthy few. And, Mr. Speaker, I believe the operative words in this motion are work to build. I contend that unless governments take proactive measures to distribute wealth fairly, wealth will continue to gravitate to those who are already rich. How so? Why is it that wealth begets even more wealth? Well, the mechanics are pretty simple. The more discretionary income one has, that is what's left over after you've paid for necessities like food, clothing, and shelter, the more money you have to save and to invest, which in turn generates more capital, which in turn can be reinvested. And since large sums of invested money yield higher returns, we can expect that the growth in the net worth of the already wealthy will outpace everyone else's by a larger and larger factor with each passing year. And, Mr. Speaker, that is exactly what has been happening. Wealth is accumulating at the top, where it is needed the least. Between 2012 and 2016, according to a study done by the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives, the net worth of Canada's wealthiest resident families rose by 37%, while that of the middle class rose by only 16%, and much of that 16% was tied up in skyrocketing house values. 87 families now possess more than 4,000 times the wealth of the average Canadian family. So, Mr. Speaker, if governments did nothing, wealth would accumulate at the top. But what the previous government did was worse than nothing. They actually accelerated the concentration of wealth in the hands of the few. One of the first things the BC Liberal government did when they took office in 2001 was to cut personal income taxes by 25%. They cut corporate taxes by 13.5% and then again to 10.5%. And by the time they left office, they were collecting more in MSP than they were in corporate taxes. In fact, they doubled MSP premiums and tuition fees and created a host of new flat taxes that ate up a much bigger percentage of small paychecks than it did from the rich. And then they held their thumbs on the scale when they introduced laws that entrenched economic inequality. They created a two-tier minimum wage. They rolled back the wages of BC's lowest-paid healthcare workers, and they amended labour laws to make it harder for working people to organize or seek redress. My colleagues across the aisle are trying to tell you that they did this to stimulate the economy. They're telling you that wealthy British Columbians reinvested their windfall back into the hands of average British Columbians by creating jobs. It's called the trickle-down theory. But in reality, that did not happen. According to the BC Business Council, the growth in gross domestic product and investment in machinery and equipment was higher during the 1990s under the BC NDP government than it was in the 2000s after the BC Liberals came to power. And by 2017, when the BC Liberals left power, the richest 10% held 56.2% of all the wealth in British Columbia, while the bottom 50% held a mere 3.2%. And, Mr. Speaker, that is a yawning and dangerous gap. Every year, the United Nations reminds us that the happiest, healthiest, safest, most socially cohesive countries are those in which wealth is distributed most evenly. Yet the leader of the BC Liberals continues to advocate for tax cuts for those at the top. Mr. Speaker, in 3 short years, our government has taken deliberate, proactive steps to build an equitable economy for all. We have eliminated MSP premiums. We are laying the foundation for a universal, affordable, accessible childcare program. We introduced a 30-point plan to make housing more affordable, and the list goes on. And it's a long list, and I trust that my colleagues on this side of the House will use some of their time to add to that list. I'm proud of what our government has already done to build an economy that is equitable for all, but we have much more to do. Thank you.